Hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown podcast. I'm Joe Oberle, senior writer from VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com, and that's Mark Craig, Vikings writer and NFL insider for the Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Mark, it's tough circumstances to start this broadcast today. We had a tragic news came over the weekend, the holiday weekend. Vikings, rookie draft choice, I think fourth round, maybe, I can't remember. Khyree Jackson, cornerback, was in a car accident with two friends, and all three of them passed away. It's just, it's tragic news. I mean, this guy was just at the precipice of his career. He's got this whole life in front of him. He's 24 years old and worked hard to get to this point, and they were really excited about him down at when they saw him in OTAs and such. And my goodness, in an instance, he's gone. I mean, how do you process this? This is just incredible for a franchise that has processed.
Yeah, I mean, and as you get older, this is the every parent's nightmare. Is it has nothing to do with football. I mean, he was. We just talked about him last week. I remember we were talking. We wanted defensive backs, and I said one of the guys of everybody on the roster, all 90 players, one of the guys I was looking forward to seeing was this guy, for two reasons. One, because he's a big corner, and the other reason was he had a personality to him. I didn't get to meet him, but I know that Andrew Kramer with the Star Tribune went and actually did did some legwork and was doing a story on that was going to run as training camp ramps up, just because of his personality, his story. He's 24, but that necessarily wasn't a bad thing, because his story about how he left football and he went and worked for 6 months or so at home, and it's just terrible to think, at 24. I mean, he's right kind of in the middle of where my kids are age-wise, and it's a reason why you lay there at night and when they're not checking in or something, you're like, it's just heartbreaking, and it's seemed like a really good kid too. So
That's a shame.
Things happen, and there's no words for it, really. It's just terrible.
Yeah, like I was telling you yesterday, I was at a memorial service for my sister-in-law. May she rest in peace, Sherry, up in heaven. And she's, had her whole life. She's lived her whole life, and she's gone a little bit too soon. But you can understand and deal with that more when someone's 24 years old and just everything that everybody was saying about him. He was great kid, great person, on and off the field, and even kind of infectious personality that people attracted to in camp. I guess. Or I should say in OTAs, it's a shame. I understand that he played, I think, one season with Dallas Turner, the guy that was drafted in the first round for the Vikings, and know him a little. So he may certainly be affected by this as things go forward, I would think.
Well, I think all of them. It's a blow. It happens. It happens in life to these guys in their personal lives. Unfortunately, it's happened before, with the Korey Stringers and
Tony Sparano.
Tony Sparano a week before camp. That probably affected Mike Zimmer and that staff. I mean, those guys were blown away by this, but the machine keeps going, and it's and it's cliche. It's sounds trite and everything, but these guys. To honor him, and I mean, what else can you do? Except move on. And
I saw a note from they sent out a number of different statements from the Vikings, and Kevin O'Connell said he was crushed by this news, and you just got a feel for these guys. They probably got to know him more than anybody because of all the the scouting and the interviews and the such, and got to know him and like him and wanted him on the roster, and boom, he's gone. I just it's like you said, it's a for parents, it's a tough blow. It's for someone like O'Connell and maybe Kwesi that really got to know him, they kind of are like parents for some of these younger kids, and you bring somebody in there and you put your arms around him, and boy, he's gone. I just can't imagine it.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. Certainly, our condolences go out to his family and the families of the others involved in the accident. It sounds like it was late in the morning on Saturday, and the other car was some friends of theirs too, I understand. So this is just tragic all the way around. Um, not like you were saying, not unknown to the Vikings and their fans. I mean, we had Tony Sparano, I think, in 2018, a week before camp. Great friend of Mike Zimmer's, and passed away, and I put a pall on that season. And then, of course, Korey Stringer passing away during training camp in Mankato. I think that was I want to say 2003. I think
2001. Yeah.
2001, and it just it's tragic, but it also after it happens, like with any death, it reverberates, and it's going to have an effect on this team. I think they'll they hardly got to know him, but they did, and so it's going to probably have its effect on the team going forward as they assemble for camp in a few weeks.
Yeah, I would think so. But they, like I said, the best way for them to honor him is to move on, and it's terrible, but that's just how they do it.
Yeah, it's funny that you were saying that last week that you were looking forward to seeing him play, and he was he was going to be a great addition to the secondary, where they certainly need some help this year. And what do you think it does now to this? Do they have to bring in somebody to in that position group to fill the hole, or what do they do from here going forward?
Well, certainly. We were saying that before this tragic news happened, that they needed a veteran corner. The team's being respectful, and you're not going to see anything here probably
right.
Wow,
and we certainly mean no disrespect talking.
Yeah. So yeah, they're. I mean, he was a guy. He's one of the reasons he's looking forward to it is because he was I don't want to say a late bloomer, but there certainly was a level of immaturity that he had, or impatience, bouncing from several junior colleges and then going to Alabama. And like a lot of guys now, whenever it doesn't go right for him, he got benched. He just moved on, went into the transfer portal to Oregon, but by all accounts sounded like he was maturing and he was going to be a potentially a steal of the draft. So there's they did not have a lot of draft picks, and one of them was used on this young man. So yeah, it's a hole in the roster that they'll have to address. I still think they need a veteran. They have to there has to be. There's a number of veterans that are out there. They're all older, obviously. They got big names like Stephon Gilmore. The guys we've mentioned last week, I think J.C. Jackson, the different guys, and it feels like for what they would have to pay if they have room. I know they have room on the cap to go get a guy like that. Would certainly help their competitive level, I would think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he got the call from the Vikings for that he was going to be drafted when he was working in the grocery store where he worked to try to make ends meet. So it's interesting, but it's once again, it's sad news. I guess he'll always be a Viking in one form or fashion. So our deepest condolences to his family and friends and to the Vikings. And we will on that note take a quick break and come back here and talk about something else. Rest in peace, Khyree Jackson. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. That's Mark Craig, Star Tribune, and I'm Joe Oberle. You know us, so you guys tuned in here each week to hear us prattle on about the Vikings. We're winding down to training camp, and it's coming up in a couple weeks, and so we've been doing a little bit of a training camp preview as we head to that date. Used to say they're heading to Mankato, but we can't say that anymore. They're heading to TCO Performance Center in Eagan. How's the facilities out there, Mark? They're still standing, after this long time tenured training camp and TCO.
Yeah, it's not. You don't load the cooler up anymore and head down there and work on an expense account like the old days. So I miss Mankato less in my 50s than I would have in my 30s. So a little more equipped to handle Mankato back in the day. I should say the Mankato nightlife in the day.
You're still in your 50s? I don't believe it.
I'm pushing toward the end of them. So
yeah, it's got to be days, doesn't it? I mean,
come on, months.
We're gonna have to change the color of your hair in that avatar we have up in the corner.
Or what hair?
Anyway, this week we wanted to take a quick look at the Vikings defensive line. It's Mark has forever wanted the Vikings to say, hey, they have some holes here to fill in the offseason. And the Vikings did fill a lot of holes in their roster this spring, but I'm not sure they took totally care of what's going on here. How do you assess the defensive line? Who are the starters, and what do you think of this group as they're heading to camp?
It's just a bunch of backups, really. I mean,
God, that hurts.
And you can't fault them too much because there is, they're getting out from underneath the Kirk Cousins contract. They're getting, they didn't have a lot of draft picks. You've got to be in a specific spot. Obviously they wanted to get the quarterback, and then they needed an edge rusher because they lost one of the best ones in the league in Daniil Hunter. So it's not a situation where you can take care of 22 spots. So the defensive line to me right now is, they've patched together some things, and they're hoping that it's good enough to get them to maybe next year whenever you have more cap money. In free agency, these defensive tackles that somehow get to the end of their first contract and they become free agents because they're worth. The money to pay them is ridiculously high. Maybe the Vikings are in the market for that one of those guys next year, but they don't have that game record. And there was back-to-back drafts. I remember beating the drum a couple years ago about the guy who ended up in Philadelphia from Georgia, and saying that would be a great pick at 13 or whatever it was, and he's gone on and played very well. So they didn't. It just hasn't worked to where they could address that in a big way. And what they've done they've tried to hit some singles and hope that a guy like Jerry Tillery, who was a first-round pick of the Raiders 5-6 years ago, they're hoping that he comes in and he can be a guy in their 3-4 scheme that can be, I think he's 5 years in the league. He's got 12.5 sacks, but be some sort of force, because he's going to start alongside Harrison Phillips, who, to me, when I say they're a bunch of backups, I would it's probably a little lowballing on Harrison Phillips, because he is a starting caliber player, but he's not a starting caliber player that played as much as he did last year. He played way too much last year. I think you need to play him less. Even the Vikings have said that. I think Harrison Phillips has even accepted that he's probably more effective whenever he's playing probably fewer snaps. And then Jonathan Bullard is a good player, but he's going to be the other starter in that 3-4 scheme. He's a good player, but he's, I would consider him kind of a backup rotational guy. Mm-hmm. And then after that, they got, they went out and got Jihad Ward, Jonah Williams. These are all, young guys that are younger guys, probably late 20s, where, they're hoping that, with the scheme, with Flores, the fact that, they're moving on, they're getting toward it. They're at forks in the road of their careers, that they can get something out of this. And the other guy,
do they have okay, go ahead. I'll let you
there's two other guys. There's two other guys that have been here, but like you've got James Lynch, who was injured last year and missed the entire year. He's one of those, go a million miles an hour type guys. He might be a good rotational guy to get back in there. And then Roy, the big kind of combo. He's got some size, he's got some quickness, but he was hurt most of last year. He didn't play a lot of snaps on defense. Like to see him healthy because he was a day 3 draft pick that had some promise there.
You talk about trying to get something out of these guys. Certainly Flores is the guy who runs the whole show, but is there a defensive line coaches? Are they the kind of guys that, we've had some good people in here in that position in the past. Do they have the kind of guys on staff that can do that? Are they going to be able to teach these guys and pull something more out of them, you think? What do you know about them?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're and I'm drawing blanks on it's off season for me, Joe, but I'm drawing some blanks on names. But when they lost last year's defensive line coach during the season, I don't believe that he left for personal reasons, and then I think he went on to the college level. I don't believe that Flores still thought that his defense was being. Not only did he not have the bodies that he needed there and the talent that he needed there, but he didn't like how it was being coached. And so I think they went out and they got, and I'm drawing a blank on who it is. I don't have it in front of me.
That's all right.
There's a hat there. There has been a switch there. And I think that it's, as we get into year 2 of Flores, you're going to see him, things are going to work a little better. It's like he's not introducing this defense now for most of these guys. So year 2 of Flores is going to help. Yeah. And that defensive line just needs to, they got to play well against the run. They just really got to, like when they went to Philadelphia and the defensive line was kind of in a state of chaos. And they played most of that game with linebackers up front or defensive ends, outside linebackers. And that's when Philadelphia ran all over them. It was Harrison Phillips and no other defensive. Nobody else had any size to them. So there was a big adjustment as they went on through the year. And I think the defensive line did get better, but that's going to be, I think, going into next year, I feel like that's going to be a real, assuming there's not other holes that arise, but I feel like that'll be like priority number 1 in 2025. We'll be getting that presence in the middle that they haven't not had in a long, long time.
You're so right. I mean, I've been sitting here thinking back to some of the great teams that we've had around here. Certainly in the 70s, you had Alan Page inside in there who was just dominant, and the teams were as well. Then you got the Williams Wall, who really dominated in the middle for the Vikings defensive line for so many years. But there's not a lot of them, and so that's why I guess I'm concerned. It was for years it's been the Vikings have neglected their offensive line. Well, now it seems like the defensive line is kind of getting short shrift, and it's going to hurt you. You got to have somebody doing it right.
Yeah, and I would say you could say it's about all Hall of Famers, but I'm talking about like a John Randall Hall of Famer, Alan Page obviously Hall of Famer, Kevin Williams should be at least been a semifinalist by now, but he's a guy that's Jared Allen's fallen through the cracks. Kevin Williams has really fallen through the cracks. So those are so rare. They're as rare as anything. A big force at defensive tackle that can stop the run and can penetrate it and rush the passer is as rare as anything in this league, I think.
So tell me this, and this is a little bit because I don't spend a lot of time with it, but the Vikings in the past couple of years since Flores came on have switched to a 3-4 rather than the traditional 4-3 they've had for forever, and that puts more emphasis on your edge rushers. Does that having talented edge rushers, and the Vikings have a few, on paper so far this year, does that take emphasis or off of need on the defensive line? Does that make their job easier? You still have to have that, right?
I would think anyone who thinks that should turn on the Philadelphia game from week 2 or 3 or whatever it was last year and watch how they ran the ball. It was being streamed, and Al Michaels, I think, was counting it. That's 3, or that's 8 in a row. That's 9 in a row. That's 10. I think they ran like 14 times in a row.
That's
right. 265 yards. And also, Ivan Pace Jr. is an outstanding player, but without someone in front of him, he becomes even smaller than he is.
Wow.
It's important. I mean, all 11 positions are important,
Yeah.
and how they, how Flores, the 3-4 for me, it just seems like it gives you so much more unpredictability. You can move guys around. You can, when it's working, whenever you want, say four edge rushers, you can put 4 across, and just run with linebackers if that, but in a situation in Philadelphia, maybe they tried that in the early stages of Flores trying to figure out all his pieces and where they fit. Tried that, and it didn't work because Philadelphia just said, okay, we're gonna take the best offensive line in football, and we're just gonna run you over, and that's what they did.
I selectively blew that game out of my memory, so I never have to think about it or talk about it again. So I wish you'd quit bringing it up.
And the thing about last year is that even though they got run over by like 260 some yards, that was still a game that came down to turnovers. That was the game where I believe Justin Jefferson was reaching for the pylon and the ball.
You're right.
Touchdown to touchback, and it was. So much about, and I don't know where to place. I know Jeff Diamond did 9 and 8. He told me as he was writing that, I think he wrote it for Vikings Territory.
Yeah,
that they were not going to be 9 and 8, and I said I could be. I didn't see it as earth shaking as people have said. Oh my God, as you look at your phone, it's like, former Vikings GM, predicts something crazy. I was like, to me, last year, if Nick Mullins had just played bad, they would have won 2 more games and they would have been in the playoffs. But he played atrocious.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between bad and atrocious. So I don't know where. I honestly, at this point, it could be anywhere. I know it's not going to be 17-0, but I know it's not going to be 0-17.
You brought up that play by Jefferson. They didn't change that rule in the offseason here, did they? I think they talked about it, but they didn't change that. If you fumble it out of the end zone, it goes.
Yeah, that's been discussed forever. I don't know that. I don't know that they'll ever change that, but it always seemed like it's just a little too much of a swing there when it could. It's a matter of inches sometimes.
It seems like it when the other team doesn't recover. They're really getting an advantage out of the end zone. I don't know. I'm not sure how they would change it, but it seems punitive, except when it happens against the team that you're playing against, and you get the benefit. Then it's not as punitive.
Then it's okay.
Then it's okay. So here I kind of put you on the spot each time with this stuff, but how would you rate this position group overall, the defensive line? And another question just to ponder too is do you think they need to get somebody else in there as well? I know they don't have a whole lot of cap space there, probably.
Well, I don't know who's. I was looking at that. Linval Joseph at 36 years old. Linval was a great. Linval was a great player. When Linval was in his prime,
got a Super Bowl ring.
You just couldn't move him, And but then we went on to the Chargers, and I think we saw him one year when the Chargers had him and the Vikings played. There was nothing left, or very little left. So I don't think he's available. Fletcher Cox, I believe he retired, but I see him listed as available defensive tackles, but he's probably 34. There's just not, anybody who's any good right now that is on a team that could help them.
Doesn't it behoove them to go with these younger players to see if they can develop?
Well, I think they already made their moves. They went out, got Jerry Tillery. They got 3 guys.
Yeah,
they got 3 guys for those 3 positions. 2 of them are probably listed as backups now, and then Jerry Tillery's is a guy going into camp as the starter. So they made their moves, and they didn't have. They weren't big time free agent moves. In fact, they might have all been. I don't know if they were 1-year deals or not, but I forget. But they were not big home run hits. They were like, hopefully, a bunt single or, slap a ball through the hole single. And so that's what they made. That's what they could do, and they're going to see how it works.
Yeah, it should be interesting. So do you have a grade for this group, this position group?
Until I see more, D, C minus.
Yes, I'd go C minus.
Yeah, I don't think anybody grades hard anymore. So I got maybe the old school D is probably now a C. So, but give me that D plus, C minus.
Oh God, he's
incomplete. We got to see more.
He's old school. I guess that's what we want to expect out of a pro football Hall of Fame voter. That Mark Craig is. He's got to be. He can't just hand out.
I can't just say that all is going to be good at that position.
It's probably not, but we'll see.
I'm motivating him, Joe. That Jerry Tillery is home right now somewhere. He's going, "Wow, I'm going to get that guy." He's like 6. I think he's like 6'8" or 6'6", like 300 pounds. So
don't make him mad. Yeah. It's a position group that's going to have to improve if the Vikings are this year. The whole defense is. So it starts up front. We'll see how they do. All right. Well, let's take another quick break, and we will come back and talk about another position that the Vikings overlook year after year after year. Come on back and see what that is. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark, as I teased going into the last break, we got another position the Vikings have always overlooked, and I did it as kind of a joke because we're looking at the wide receiver position. And if there's any position the Vikings have excelled at in their history, it's this one. They've got, when you look back, you got Randy Moss and Chris Carter and Ahmad Rashad. You've got blanking on now. They got a whole bunch. Percy Harvin was a great wide receiver. You've got the Washingtons, the Gilliams, all back through the years. The Vikings have always had great pass catchers, and they were a lot of fun to watch. Especially enjoyed it. Now they have two really good ones in their stable, and in Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And the only question remains for this position group is who's going to be number 3 and who are the backups. So why don't you run down this oft-neglected position by the Vikings of wide receiver?
Yeah, you got to throw Anthony Carter in there.
Oh, my God, Anthony Carter.
But, anybody, Ahmad Rashad usually is a conversation stopper for me. But
yeah, that's what a lot of people think. But when he beat Cleveland that time with the one catch in the end zone.
That's usually a stopper for me. Obviously you got the best, highest paid receiver, probably the best receiver, a guy who played 10 games last year. We need him. They need him to play a little more than 10 games this year. But Justin Jefferson, even in 10 games, still had 1,000 yards, which is old school. You talk about old school.
Yeah.
His worst year is, playing 10 games, having 1,000 yards. He's had 1,800 yards, 1,600 yards, I think 1,400 yards. So it's all about, he's working with a new quarterback, whether it's Sam Darnold, who's established himself as not starter caliber, but he's in a good situation now, or you got a rookie. So but I still think, Jefferson's going to help. He's one of these guys where he's going to help the quarterback just by how he runs the routes and because just how good he is at catching and his radius and just everything. He's going to help him, but he needs help from the other receivers. And, Jordan Addison, you probably couldn't ask for a better number 2 right now because he had a fantastic rookie season and he's only going to get better.
Is that dependent more on his or on Jefferson being out that he blossomed to such a degree, or would he have done as well had Jefferson been in there taking coverage away?
Well, I think he was scoring. He scored his first 2 or 3 touchdowns, I believe, with Jefferson on the field. So yep. He was already benefiting from Jefferson, the attention that Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson were getting. And these receivers, let's face it, you can get a first round pick like a Laquan Treadwell, and he doesn't do anything. And then the whole first year you're hearing, well, his ankle needs to heal, or once he develops, blah blah blah. Anymore, it seems like when these receivers are they're so NFL ready when they come in that with very few exceptions, when they come in, if they're good, if they're not very good their first year, you can't really count on him after that. But this guy came in, it wasn't too big for him, and he's a legitimate, potential star player in the league. Unfortunately, their third receiver really is T.J. Hawkinson, and even though he's a tight end, and he's not going to be, very unlikely that he's going to start the season, and it looks like he's probably going to miss that first month as he recovers from that ACL injury.
Yeah.
So that really puts a lot of pressure on right now their number 3 receiver is Brandon Powell, and he's a overachiever. He's a decent but not great punt returner. But he's your third receiver.
See, I think that's a little bit of a concern because I think Brandon Powell was great last year in his role, which wasn't necessarily a third receiver. It was a guy who came in here and, you could find him open on third downs. He'd make the catch and he'd get some first downs. And if you put the pressure on that or the additional need for him to excel in the third position, I wonder if that changes it some and he maybe struggles because maybe you're getting more coverage or different coverages in that third receiver spot. I don't know, but I like Brandon having him on the team, but I'd like him in his role that he was last year, as opposed to moving him into that third spot and expecting, KJ Osborne numbers of seasons past.
Yeah, it would be so nice for them if they had KJ Osborne of 2 years ago, KJ Osborne of 3 years ago. Even an Adam Thielen, but Thielen wouldn't fit into this right now because he's just way too expensive.
And there's so much talk about him being traded here. Have you seen any of that online?
I feel like whatever he's making, it's way too much to fit into what they're doing. But yeah, I think he went and he was basically Carolina's only option last year, so he did have some numbers and stuff last year. But I don't know the Jalen Naylor is a guy that has a lot of potential. He's been dealing with the concussions. Be interesting to see him. Tristan Jackson is a guy that you see a little bit in camp every year in recent years. Lucky Jackson, Malik Knowles is a guy they got last year. I think late day 3, something like that. Basically was a redshirt year because he was hurt. I know that they like him a little bit. And then the tight end Tanyan from the Packers.
Yeah, Robert Tanyan.
They tried to do some things with the tight end to get by as long as until TJ gets back and gets in a groove. So you're going to see that. But yeah, there is definitely it just feels thin. Like if you get an injury to Jefferson, or you get an injury to Addison, boy, it's gonna go. It's not going to be good quick for these quarterbacks. So they need those guys to be healthy, and they need just to fill in until TJ gets back going.
Do you think there really isn't any is there a receiver out there that they can go grab and fill in and maybe be spot duty and excel before Hawkinson comes in and gets up to speed and takes all those extra passes, catches away? I mean, is there something out there? Is it worth pursuing, or is that just us who sit out here in the audience and say, come on, spend money, buy more things?
Laquan's out there. He's available. He's 20
Troy
now.
Williamson probably has 2.
Who?
Troy Williamson.
Oh, yeah. He's a little bit older. I saw Michael Thomas is out there. He's 31. I don't know. I really don't know what the story is on him. Marquise Goodwin is, but he's 33. I think, other than corner is the one thing even before what happened, the tragedy with Khyree, that was the one position I felt like, they were still, because I could see these corners that are out there with these big names, big egos, waiting. And, maybe signing right before a camp. That's the one position I felt like they still might go out and get one more guy. All the other positions, like a defensive line, I feel like they did what they could. There's nothing out there. Receiver, they did what they could. There's nothing out there. Offensive line, same thing. So yeah, I don't see them going out and getting another receiver. But
is it possible? Like, I mean, you always hear that the drafts are often filled with receivers because I don't know why there's maybe not great ones, but there's serviceable receivers out there. Maybe there's an undrafted free agent receiver out there, or maybe there's a cut that's going to happen when camp comes that someone that can come in, they can grab to fill a spot until is that something you think they would consider?
Certainly. I mean, at all positions, when cut down day, that's has potential every year. It does. It's that's where you start mixing and matching strengths and weaknesses for different teams. What's sort of like Shaquille Griffin. He's the nobody to the teams that let him go in the last year, but he was a lot to the Vikings because there was a need there. Same thing with that I could see them keeping their eyes on the cut down days at receiver, corner, even offensive line. Something. So, but that can be said across the board. And as far as another, I think you got a better receiving back in Aaron Jones. I think he becomes more a factor in the passing game, certainly more than what we saw with Madison.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The Vikings do have a little bit of cap room to play with. Like you said earlier, next year is going to be the big. They'll have a lot more space next year, and they'll probably be more aggressive because they won't have as many. They'll be aggressive in free agents because they won't have as many draft choices to play with next year. So we may see some changes there. I don't want to throw away this year, but boy, oh boy, it's next year should be. This should be kind of a year to set you up for next year to know just exactly what you need and then go find it in free agency and try to make that next step.
Well, if they hit on the quarterback, yeah, that's could be the start of a lot of good things because that's number one, getting out from under Kirk's contract, picking the right quarterback that you can have at team friendly salary for 4 or 5 years. And then just fill in what granted, they're going to have a lot more cap space next year because the cap's going to go up and up and up, but other teams are going to have more money, but I think they'll be able to focus in on some sort of defensive lineman that could really be an impact player, whether it's the draft or a free agency. So yeah, I mean, that won't mean anything if JJ McCarthy doesn't become a starting caliber quarterback who can win in this league. So
what do you mean? That's going to happen.
It's right away, right? It's just
listen to Adam Thielen. He's been working out with him. He knows.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you do get a good feeling about this kid. He's been a winner wherever he's played. He seems to have it, but Sam Darnold. It felt like Sam Darnold had it 6-7 years ago. And he clearly didn't.
Mark, how much do you think you'll actually see of? Well, maybe you will see a lot of JJ when camp starts, because and I know they only show so much to the media. Well, when camp goes on, you get to see a lot of them. You get to see the whole practice, so you will get to see a lot then. But are you excited to take a look and see what this guy's got, McCarthy or?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch him, especially the joint practices. I mean. I won't go overboard like the team does or like O'Connell does and act like the joint practices are, the Super Bowl. But they're certainly, you can see a little bit more when they're going against a defense that they don't see all the time. He's got to play in the preseason, obviously, and I think Sam Darnold's got to play in the preseason. So we're gonna, I think the preseason may be different this year, unless because O'Connell being from the Rams. Play nobody. If anybody's a hint of being a starter, they don't play. But I feel like you got to see these quarterbacks, and if you see the quarterbacks, you got to put a line in front of them. I feel so. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, you won't see Aaron Jones, you won't see Justin Jefferson,
really.
Guys like that. But I would think you would have to see some of this. I don't know. Maybe that's too old school, but
Well, won't these joint practices be more interesting than the preseason games? They kind of were last year, weren't they?
well, yes, because the preseason game nobody played.
Yeah.
But I mean, if JJ McCarthy's going to play, I mean, I don't know. Do you just play Nick Mullins in the preseason? I think you got to. I think JJ's got to play. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on what you can put in front of him. You don't want the
Good word. It's he's got to get some live action.
Right. You don't want the future of the franchise to get drilled, but by the same token, he's got to play at some point. So, okay, well, that'll about do it this week. We'll be back next week with some more training camp preview. Got a few more positions to go through as we wind down to camp. I'm sure people are hopefully going to get excited as the season goes near. We thanks Mark each week for your insight. Thanks Mike Woldham for producing. Thanks Joe Johnson. Put an arm around Khyree up there, and thanks to all you folks for tuning in. We appreciate it each week. So come on back, and we'll be talking about some more next week. And until then, rest in peace, Khyree, and Skol.
Skol.